Hello and welcome to the Addressable Podcast, where we dive into growth and marketing and everything in between, and we bring some of the most experienced, best people in the business. I'm delighted to introduce our guest for today, Quinn Campbell. Quinn is co-founder and growth lead at PTAL and Attention Dex for buying and selling attention liquidity. We're going to get into that. Advertisers can use PTAL to reach unique growth channels, including Telegram, KOLs, affiliates, user-generated content, blogs, display, and in-game. Previously, Quinn was VP of growth at Sky Mavis, which is where he launched Axie Infinity Origins, negotiated Google Play's first approval of an NFT game, shipped Web3's largest creator program, built a Web3 UA machine, and much, much more. Quinn got his start in mobile gaming, published at Voodoo. So Quinn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Shamir. Happy to be here.
That's great. I'm really, really happy to have you. We talked a little bit before, and I feel like there's so much that we could go into, but let's start with a really easy question. Why do you do what you do, Quinn?
Yeah, that is an easy one. It's just been a bit of a journey of obsession, I think, deeper and deeper into Web3. I started in Web2 gaming and really saw how a lot of the economics were broken there. And right around that time, Web3 gaming popped up. I saw how it solved a lot of those economics, and I was fortunate enough to join a really awesome team in Web3 gaming at Sky Mavis. And that was a blast as well. But during my time there, I just saw how much of a gap there was in attention tech, in everything you might need in the stack to really perform UA and advertising in Web3. And I just kind of became obsessed with that challenge as well. And that's what's really brought me through today.
Very cool. So you're a freak of cutting edge, it sounds like, and just obsessed with it. So okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, you mentioned user acquisition. Tell us a little bit about kind of your approach with user acquisition, and maybe let's go back to Sky Mavis and your experience
Yeah.
there, right, with Axie. Why don't you share some strategies, tactics, frameworks you deployed to achieve your goals? Let's start with what your goals actually were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I was at Axie, I guess almost a year and a half ago now, which is it's crazy. Time flies. So I imagine things have shifted and changed, but with where we were in the market and in Axie's progression, I think that the experience is still super valuable for people building in Web3 today, especially people building games. And we really thought about growth across four different kind of buckets. Our day-to-day framework for thinking about growth was based on community, content creators, ecosystem projects or guilds, right? And traditional games UA, just, ad buying. And each day our goal was to just move the needle and drive growth within one of those buckets and then move to the next one. And I can kind of double click on each of those. Community was obviously the biggest driver for everything Axie did and everything Ronan has done. And Jiho, who was my boss there and co-founder and growth lead at Sky Mavis. He literally wrote the book on community-led growth. I mean, actually, literally, just this morning, he shared a ebook on Web3 community-led growth on Twitter, which is awesome, and would definitely recommend everyone read that. But he had all kinds of really powerful unlocks, I think, that we used. Things like leadership availability in Discord. It was so important to him that everyone on C-level was in the Discord. And I think a lot of projects miss that these days. Something called strategic gifting, which I'd love to get into later. He did powerful vampire attacks. White glove onboarding was something that, it's funny. He was running a community of 2 million at one point. And white glove onboarding, he swears, is how he got this thing off the ground. Literally, he could name every single person in the Discord up until a certain point. It's really, really impressive. And then, yeah, I mean, even outside of community, right? We spent a lot of time focusing on content creators. We built this content creator program that was just an incredible learning. It's a bit of a story, but the first iteration of the content creator program that we shipped was an utter failure. And I mean that not in the sense that nobody participated in it. I mean it in the sense that everybody hated it.
Okay.
We spent 2.5 months building this content creator program. We spoke to some of the really leading minds in Web2 content creators. We thought we had this really elegant, beautiful program. We shipped it, and within 30 minutes, there was this Twitter space with 70 of the biggest Axie content creators, all just hating on what we'd shipped. And it was a scary moment. We had to get in there and kind of figure things out. But what I learned through that process was really impressive. Is these Web3 content creators, we thought all they wanted to do was get paid, and it turns out that's actually not their biggest driver. They're really looking for two things. It's access and recognition. That's it.
Ooh,
And
okay.
any pay that comes, secondary to that is really sweet. It's a wonderful cherry on top, but that's not the biggest driver for them. It comes down to access and recognition. So we rebuilt this content creator program from scratch, shipped it again, and now I think it has over 3,000 creators in it, which is, I'm positive, the single largest Web3 content creator CRM in existence. And it's all built around these ideas of access and recognition. And that was very powerful for Axie, extremely powerful for Axie. It's probably the reason Ronin has become as powerful as Ronin is just because of the content creator ecosystem there.
So how do you, I mean, I'd love to dive into a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
Let's kind of go between community and content creation. Those two feel very,
sure.
very connected, right? When you talk about white glove onboarding,
Yeah,
can you kind of walk us through what that actually means and how that scales? I mean, again, to your
it
point, when you get
doesn't.
to
It
2 million,
doesn't.
it doesn't scale,
It's
right? Okay.
no, but it's a great point to bring up. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with what sticks out about that. But Jiho's whole thesis was to do things that don't scale, especially in the early days. And so he so strongly believed in white glove onboarding. And when he began, it didn't matter what the potential user looked like. Every single user that entered the Discord or expressed any type of interest anywhere, Jiho became their best friend, spent everything, all of his time that he could to make sure that they got integrated, they got over any humps in the UX to begin with, and they felt like part of the community. And so many of our biggest whales and core contributors today are the result of people that that white glove onboarded. Now, as it's a lot bigger, it's not quite scalable. So now I think there's a lot more focus on whales. And so when someone big from another community starts getting interest in Axie, Jiho's going to be, in their DMs and giving a white glove experience.
Okay. And you mentioned strategic gifting. Can
That
you
is
elaborate on that?
probably one of Jiho's most innovative concepts ever, and it's freaking powerful. So basically, as you start building a Web3 community and you're really kind of intense, excited community members start joining, they're going to start doing work for you. That's the beautiful thing about decentralized experiences, is that because they're token holders and because they're part of the community, they feel incentive aligned with you, and they're excited about what you're doing, and they want to do work for you. And so that may be like making, hosting Twitter spaces or translating things, or even just going and talking to 5 friends and getting all 5 of those friends into the Discord. They're out there literally doing work for you, and they're not doing it for extrinsic benefits. They're not looking for anything in between, but they're going to come back to the Discord and they're going to tell you about what they did because they feel pride in what they did. And it always happens, and every single community experiences this. And right there in that moment, you have an incredible opportunity to strategically gift them something and lock them in forever. And this is what Jiho did really well. He would basically have wallets loaded up with all kinds of either AXS, which was the token in Axie, or very rare NFTs, things like this, high value items. And in these important moments when someone came back to talk about the work that they had just done, he would shoot him a DM. It was very random. Shoot him a DM and give them some awesome gift and say, "Hey, thanks for everything you're doing. You're being noticed, and we appreciate you." And again, today, most of the core contributors to Axie, who now are whales and big people in all of Web3, actually got their start in Axie because of some strategic gift that Jiho had given them in that moment.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. So you're saying it's money is a motivating factor, but there are so many other motivating
Totally.
factors as well. Right.
Totally. And
Right.
remember, this was before the days of airdrop farming and things like that. So, I think your average user, one, didn't have expectations of earning something for nothing almost. And two, yeah, there wasn't this whole army of airdrop farmers that's out there now.
Okay. Let's keep going. You mentioned two other things. You mentioned ecosystem and
Yeah.
traditional user acquisition. Let's talk about ecosystem.
Yeah, I'll glaze over ecosystem. That was the biggest growth driver for Axie leading up until mid 2021, which is basically guilds, right? The beautiful thing about building a protocol where ecosystem projects or guilds can succeed is that they do all of the work of basically UA and onboarding on your behalf. And so if you can build something that is conducive to them and you make their experience wonderful, then they'll spend all of their time onboarding people into your project for you. So yeah, that was a very powerful one for Axie. I think it's kind of not quite so much anymore because of the way the economics have changed, but it's still something important to keep in mind. And then UA was just ad spend was really my biggest, most interesting challenge for the 2 years that I was at Sky Mavis. We put a lot of effort into figuring this one out. We hacked an ad tech stack that was super hacked together because nothing really existed. This is 2021, 2022. Nothing really existed that could help us do what we wanted to do. And it was working at the very top of the funnel in very interesting ways. I mean, at one point we were getting like 17-cent CPI, which in LATAM on Android, so I will qualify that, but it's still impressive. Still impressive. So we were very happy with those numbers. But we just couldn't quite get these users to convert into paying users. And I think we were missing out on a lot of measurement, and we didn't have any type of on-chain measurement capability. So attribution kind of stopped at that point, which was an issue. And we also didn't have any real kind of like conversion moments, Web 2 to Web 3 conversion moments in app. So again, top of funnel was solved, but a lot more interesting challenges to work on.
The conversion action. So there's no conversion action. We're talking about a game. The game has NFTs, right? There's a marketplace essentially that's kind of happening in the background. How did you guys think of kind of, in traditional sense, lifetime value? I feel like in Web 2, it's just, you have the data and you kind of know, right? How do you look at that? Do you look at market cap? Do you look at floor? Do you look at, what do you look at and how do you make sense of it?
Yeah, Shamir, let's like put our tinfoil hats on here because I want to get kind of very Web3 degen almost, and I want your opinion on this too. But for all of my time at Axie, I never knew our player level LTVs, and I came from Web2 gaming, right? So when I first arrived, that was shocking to me, and then it was normal by 6 months in there. And I would actually venture to guess that most Web3 games today who have players actually don't know what their player level LTVs are, which is crazy. But it then kind of begs the question, which is like, what does matter? What is the number that a lot of companies are thinking about? And I think it's closer to FTV. I think it's closer to like a market cap. And maybe heuristically in their head, they're like doing an FTV divided by per player, like an FTV divided by DAU or something like that. I don't think anyone's actually doing that math, but that's roughly the way that they're kind of judging things. Because ultimately, they're trying to turn attention into value. And in Web 2, the way you do that is attention has to get turned into monetization. But in Web 3, token price can actually capture value, and it does it pretty damn efficiently. And so they're now just trying to turn attention into value by turning attention basically into token purchases. What do you think about all of that? It's
to your point, I think we're kind of writing the book, and I think we're figuring out a lot of this as we go. And I think in many senses, time will tell what the right angle, or lens to look at these things probably is. Intuitively, it sounds like you guys were on the right track. I mean, I was at Algorand on the ecosystem growth front. So so we were thinking of ecosystem ROI, and with ecosystem ROI, it was there. I'll give you an example. There's an infrastructure project that wants to come on chain. And they provide a certain tool or they provide a certain explorer or something like that. That's not, if we invest in that company, we're not necessarily going to see our market cap go up as a consequence of that. Definitely not in a measurable way. We're not necessarily going to see even more users directly, right? But we know that we're plugging in a hole for other tools to come or other users or onboarding devs. And that's kind of how we thought of it, right? So it's almost like we have to abstract it a little bit out and say, well, we want an active ecosystem. We want to lower the entry barrier for devs. And this qualitatively will do that, right? Yeah. So I think, again, we're kind of writing the book and we're all figuring this stuff out.
So this ecosystem ROI concept was a qualitative measure. Is that right? It's not
a little more, yeah, because, well, I guess over time you could probably quantify it because you can look at how many projects came and say used a certain infrastructure tool, right? And then you can look at their users. But our industry moves so fast and you need so many kind of feedback loops that will often take too long to kind of, iterate as you go.
See, speaking of how fast things move, right there you just said over time you could quantify it. My first gut reaction is no, you couldn't, because how the hell could you attribute all of that? But I'm thinking from my 2021 brain. Now that's exactly what Addressable has. Right. So we've come so far in just these past 2 years. So I think that a lot of this stuff will start to get solved for. We just got to kind of be patient as we get there.
That's right. And you've mentioned another really good point, which I think most Web3 companies today use your traditional Web2 tools, CRM, Salesforce, HubSpot, and
even Web2 attribution, which falls short a lot of times.
For sure, right. So that's exactly the point, right? It shows you half of the picture.
That's exactly right.
But you actually, and then you might look at what's happening on chain, but there's a gap in between. There's like this chasm.
Precisely.
So I do think
Yeah.
right. So I think in the future, we're going to see this picture in a much clearer manner and then be able to iterate and optimize based
I'll,
on the entire puzzle.
Yes, I'll give you another blind spot that I've been trying to get my head around. It's more on the product side. If you think product analytics, and this was an experience at Axie, we wanted product analytics in Axie. And so we actually onboarded, not Mixpanel, but I'm even blanking on Mixpanel's largest competitor now, but it's the same concept as Mixpanel, with major standard traditional Web2 product analytics. And the whole thing there is to kind of track your aggregate, like your average user journey, and looking at, from the point that they hit your app, what steps are they going through, what path are they following, the majority of users, figuring out which ones are actually your highest value users, seeing their average path, and you kind of get like this aha moment or a aha path, and then you want to push every user through that path. Make every user replicate the path that created the highest value users. So yeah, we integrated that, and it was really cool and gave us visibility into a product that we never had before. But I had this realization that the web product experience actually includes community, and no product analytics tool could give visibility into community. And I realized it was like this iceberg where now Amplitude, that's the name of the product we're using. Amplitude gave us this beautiful vision into this, which is great for Web 2, but actually in Web 3, it looks like this, where this is product and this is community, and the user journey does this, and we only saw half of the user journey. And so there's a major gap in product analytics too.
Right. So again, we're kind of getting back to the qualitative, and
Yes, right.
Let's call it marketing as an art, not just a science, right? Where you go to Discord and you almost feel the energy, right? And you kind of connect the dots and try to make sense of how that either amplifies or supports or integrates into your customer journey. Fantastic. Let's kind of go back to growth tactics, strategies. So I'm interested in how you compared these different acquisition buckets and allocated resources to them. And then kind of a follow-up question to that is, was there a channel or again, a tactic that worked unproportionately well to the extent it surprised you?
Yeah, it's a great question. We didn't have as many numbers around a lot of these things as we would have hoped. It goes back to this marketing as an art piece. I do think we spent the most amount of our efforts on content creators and community because they just seem to continuously work. In terms of outperforming, I think content creator program was probably one of our highest returns. And outside of that, like I mentioned, strategic gifting was really powerful as well. Yeah, okay. I think if I had to spend more time somewhere, it would even be content creator program and really double down on that.
Interesting. Because they're your biggest advocates. They're the ones pushing
Absolutely.
Your brand. They're the ones essentially amplifying you in a much more scalable way, if I'm understanding correctly.
That's right. They're amplifying and they're onboarding. They're doing a lot of the marketing and onboarding work. And then the even more powerful part is at scale. And we saw this when we were at our biggest scale at Axie is community starts to break down a little bit. You can't have that same kind of tight-knit feeling. And so the community fragments into sub-communities. And a lot of the content creators are the ones managing these sub-communities. So content creators not only do the top of funnel, but they actually help you scale your community as well.
And how do you navigate with them between harnessing them or guiding the way? In a sense, when we talk about this, I feel like there's a loss of control. Am I right?
I can see that, but I think it's important not to feel that way. And this would be, I would kind of call this like a classic Web 2 versus Web 3 friction. And this is something that I went through, especially when I first started at Sky Mavis, but it's getting comfortable with the decentralization of it all, getting comfortable with building in public, getting comfortable with letting all of your token holders, your stakeholders behind the curtain. And actually treating them as part of builders in your product. And so when these content creators come on, they are looking to you for the narrative to push, absolutely. And Jiho did a really great job of that. And you can watch his Twitter today. A large percent of what he's doing on Twitter is actually just reiterating and cleaning and A/B testing narratives for content creators and community members to absorb and then turn around and re-push out on their own side. So they do take a lot of that from you, but you have to be very comfortable letting them put their own spin on it and take it in their own direction, and even taking things from them. Sometimes a content creator may end up saying something better than you, and suddenly you pull that back in and you make it your own. That content creator feels loved for having created it. But this is a lot of just getting comfortable with letting them behind the curtain and giving them the exact same seat at the table, that your teammate actually working in the office might have along with you.
Rebuttal accepted. Like you're totally right. The more I think of it, the more the notion of Web3, right, gives community the power. I mean, in essence, you're on the same journey, you're on the same path, and you really rely on them, right, to be an integral part of who you are. And for that, you have to give up some of the control.
Right.
You have to
That's
delegate it outwards, and that's really the secret and the key. That's really interesting.
Absolutely. The way we used to think about it is that they are truly the co-owners of your network.
Right.
And they're just as much a co-owner as you are a co-owner.
Love it. Love it. Okay, let's pivot into play to earn model. I feel like for those who don't know, Axie really, really crushed it. Like Axie was really a breakthrough concept, a breakthrough game, a breakthrough, I think, like adoption trigger even into Web3. But what is once a project, a game like this starts gaining traction, is the money starts coming in, right? And that's a positive side effect on one side, but on the other side, changes the dynamics a little bit, doesn't it? Like you mentioned a few minutes ago, you said the economics have changed. Can you kind of walk us through how that evolved and how that affected gameplay and maybe how that's being dealt with today?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Axie really blew up, in early and mid 2021, it was during COVID, which it was really great timing. But Axie kind of created the play to earn movement. Nothing like this had existed before. And if you look at why it's so cool, this was a great thing that clicked for me. Amongst all of the participants or stakeholders in a game, in the players themselves, I think unequivocally bring the single most amount of value to the game. And then after that, maybe the game dev who actually built it, not to knock them, but if the players don't show up, then it's all worth nothing ultimately. Now in Web 2, the players, even though they brought the most amount of value, they never actually participated in that value that they're helping to generate. And that's what play to earn really unlocked for the first time.
Right.
And that was so cool for me to see. That was what brought me in the first place. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it that way. Now, in terms of how they participate in that value, this is the part that I think is still being figured out. And the way Play to Earn did it was, basically these players showed up, they participated, they brought player liquidity, they helped grow the game. And so in exchange, they would earn some small amount of a token after each game they played, after each win that they had, basically. And this token was a bit unsustainable ultimately. It was an inflationary token that had no cap. And so we saw that model break. It was really powerful when it was working. I think it helped, millions of people in the Philippines. What was also really cool was it funded millions of new wallets. So it was this onboarding mechanism for, millions of people who not only had never been in crypto before, many of them had never even had a credit card or had been banked before. And now suddenly they had cash in a wallet and were playing around on Web3. So that was awesome. In terms of what's next, look, I think an incredible distribution mechanism was unlocked with this. It certainly has to be balanced. We talked about airdrop farmers before, but I don't think that this distribution mechanism will go away. It bootstraps player liquidity into gameplays in a way that's never really been done before and with speed that we've never seen before. All of these projects, they launch with a play to earn budget, almost, if you will, a play to earn fund. I think they're calling them many different things now, but ultimately it's a marketing fund denominated in their own token that can be used to pay people for coming into the game in the first place. That's probably here to stay. Axie shifted their play to earn to focus more on basically esports. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now it's very leaderboard led. And so the players who are actually the best, and in order to be the best, you have to play the most and buy the best assets. They're the ones that are earning cash back out. That does make a lot of sense. I think we're going to also start to see some really interesting sources for where this play to earn kind of capital comes from. And one thing I'm very interested in is how advertisers can start to pay for some of this. We're seeing some really exciting things with what I'm calling incentivized ad units. There's a couple projects out here that are basically building these incentivized ad units, which it allows the ad viewer to earn some small, very small amount, but they basically capture part of the CPM just for watching that video, that ad in the first place, just for the impression that occurs. And that makes sense because, they're probably their data is being used to target them. But even if it's not, they're They're not just 100% being farmed. That's interesting. That's a big unlock. And I think that could also start to fund some of these play to earn budgets in some way, shape, or form.
So I feel like, now 3 years later, we're play to earn as opposed to play and earn kind of gets a bad rep, because I think what a lot of people have observed, especially with Axie, is that when that incentive is there, that monetary incentive, and I can buy assets, well, why don't I just pay someone in the Philippines to go play for 12 hours? And, and that's just going to save me a lot of time and get me to that leaderboard. So in other words, it turns the dynamic from more of a game into more of a job. Now you're describing incentivized ad units, which, by the way, I totally believe in. Like, I think this is another probably rabbit hole that we should dive into. I think the future of advertising is there. It's more permissioned, right? It's more relevant. It's targeted. It's serving me. But still, kind of when we're going into that realm, I get paid for my attention here. How do you preserve the delight of?
That's a great question. You can absolutely do both. You're ultimately getting paid for the value that you are generating. It makes so much sense when we think about it that way, and yet it's hard for us to think about it that way because it's just never how it's worked in Web 2. Web 2 is this nascent version of the internet that's been around for like 20 years, and I think the next 100 years are going to be closer to what we see in Web 3, which is every time you generate value, you're able to capture some small portion of that, right? And I think a great example goes back again to how Axie's treating a play to earn today, which is this recent play to rice launch. I think they launched it like 2 months ago, I want to say, and it's been awesome, super successful. And you can look at the metrics in Axie itself, like have hockey sticks since this came out. Basically, they took the play to earn model, they broke it down a little bit. Instead of previously play to earn, you would earn purely for winning a game. Instead, they looked and they said, what are the most important metrics to us? What key things do we want to be completed within the Axie ecosystem? Winning a game is important, but what else is important, right? There's also things like completing quests on a quest board, basically things that drive on-chain transactions. What are the most important metrics to the business? And then how do we get our users to actually hit those metrics? And so they created this system where if you hit all of those metrics, there's a bounty board you do each day. You go through all these metrics, and if you hit them all at the end of the day, then you are participating in play to rice. And basically, at the end of that day, you earn an amount of money exactly equal to 1 kilogram of rice in the Philippines. It's genius. Of rice. That's right. You're paid out in, I believe, AXS, maybe SLP, I'm not sure, probably AXS, but it's equal to 1 kilogram of rice. That's it. It's capped. Okay. So now you can no longer go and, try to game the system and earn an exorbitant amount of money, but it's still impactful. It's still helping you put food on the table, which is awesome. And it's driving a ton of value back to Axie because you're hitting all these metrics that are very, very important to Axie. So I think this is a very balanced approach to play to earn that Axie's come up with here.
That is fascinating. Note to self, I'm going to look up how that affected the stats and how it affected the price of rice in the Philippines, perhaps.
That hockey stick too.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, let's go back into ad tech. So you mentioned something really interesting, incentivized ad units.
What we're building at PTAL is an ad exchange. It's an attention dex, right? We're decentralizing an ad exchange. We're basically putting all of the traditional ad exchange stack onto a DEX protocol. That would absolutely solve for transparency. And if there's middlemen in the process, you can see them all. You shouldn't technically need them though, because a lot of the data is more transparent as well. So that's how I think we're solving for a lot of it.
So what's the next step? What's that next kind of milestone in the evolution of ads?
It's an extremely interesting one. It's unlocking the publisher side, unlocking the supply side. And I want to double click on this because this has been fascinating for me. All right. So in Web 2, if you think about like the power leverage between the advertisers and the publishers, I think power solidly sits with the advertisers in Web 2. Why? Because, most publishers in Web 2 are just like a website or a free-to-play app, and they're just hungry for monetization any way they can get it.
Right.
And so they'll do whatever it takes to come let advertisers or an SDK come in here and just serve ads and let them cash out. And it's great. It works. So we started going to market with what we've built, and we started going straight to the advertisers. This is in Web 3 now. And thinking it was going to be a challenge. And all the advertisers were going, oh, yes, hell yes, we got cash. They have budget, especially now with marketing budgets going like this. They're denominated in tokens and token prices are going up. So all the advertisers are hungry for something like this. So we said, oh, wow, this is easy. We've cracked it. Let's go find some supply. We went to the supply side, and there's almost zero supply. in Web3. Web3 supply. What I mean by that is Web3 dApps, solidly
Sure.
Web3 wallet connected websites. None of them are actually serving ads. They don't have any ad inventory. They have zero interest in ads monetization in Web3. So you have this dynamic where there's tons of ad budget that wants to spend to advertise on sites and in dApps, and nowhere for them to put it. And that's been a really, really interesting learning for us. So the big unlock will come from unlocking supply, whatever it takes to convince Web3 publishers, Web3 dApps, Web3 sites to start showing advertising on their platforms. Whoever does that, whoever aggregates supply in Web3 is going to win this space. And if I was starting over from scratch, or for any listener who's interested in becoming a founder right now, I would absolutely start an SSP, a Web3 SSP. I only know of one person doing it, and they're crushing it already. And that's a huge opportunity right now.
Okay, but on top of that, are there enough eyeballs? Are there enough impressions? Like I think of myself, okay, so I'm a Web3 user, but I
Yeah.
still, my time still divides far and more into, on Web3
Sure.
platforms, whether it's Instagram or Twitter, X or whatever, right? Just traditional media channels. So is the unlock going to come from those traditional channels adopting kind of that Web3 mindset, or is it going to come from within? Is it top down or ground
That's
up?
an interesting question. I think it's both. It's attacking from both sides. There's going to be
Meet in the middle.
more where, all of us, we have to believe that the users, on-chain active users, hockey sticks. And so there's going to be more people coming in to use these Web3 sites. But on the flip side, we have to believe that in some way, shape, or form, Wallet Connect starts to happen in what are traditionally Web2 sites right now. And I think things like Coinbase Wallet coming out are helping that.
Love it. Let's talk about your marketing stack. So this is just a broad kind of question, but I'd love to get your input. What are the top 3 marketing tools that you use, traditional or?
So I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction,
Go
if
for
that's
it.
all right. And instead, I'm just going to plug some of my favorite projects right now.
Go for it.
And they're all in Web3 tech stack basically. But to me, Safari is extremely interesting just because of the community that they've built. And any Web3 growth leader should join that community. I think it's just a high alpha place. I'm obviously bullish on Addressable and what you guys are building. I've seen the product. It's awesome. And everyone I talk to talks about how strong the targeting is, which is very, very cool. Then there's 3 more that are very interesting to me right now. Incentivized ad formats. I mentioned it earlier. I can't get enough of this. I think incentivized ad formats is going to help unlock the supply side. It's going to unlock publishers in Web3. Why? Because when users realize, right now Web3 users hate ads. But if users realize they can start to earn just for those ads being in place, they may start to go to the devs and say, hey, why aren't there ads in here? You're blocking an extra earning opportunity for me. And so these incentivized ad units could start to unlock them. 2 that are very cool to me are Zebedee.
Zebedee. Okay.
Yeah, Zebedee, something like that. I think it's a biblical name. Zebedee and Boost is kind of doing it, Boost.xyz. They probably wouldn't like me calling them that, but that's how I kind of see them. But Zebedee's the most interesting one. Zebedee's actually converting Web 2 games into Web 3 just by paying ad viewers right now. I think monetization solutions, or SSPs, are also crushing it. Reniverse, Reneverse. That is what I'm seeing as the only SSP in Web3 right now. And they've started rolling out, they're serving ads in all kinds of mobile games already. And they're doing really, really well. So that's one that's very interesting. Actually, Reniverse has a Twitter space in like approximately 3 hours, I think, which I'll be on. Anyways, it'll probably be over by the time this airs. And then the last one is Adsgram. Adsgram is brand new. It is the only ad network serving ads in Telegram games right now.
Oh, wow.
So not Telegram chats, but specifically in Telegram games. That's awesome to me. They started building like 5 months ago, so great foresight from the team before anyone was talking about Telegram games. And I've been chatting with them, and I'm just very bullish on what they're building.
Okay, so we're talking a lot about ads, and kind of the incentive to, or incentivizing people to opt in and say, hey, I'm going to share this information, and I'm not going to share this information, and I'm going to interact here, and I'm not going to interact here. And I think Web3 as kind of the perfect platform or tech stack, right, to reward users based on that. How do you kind of view, though, ads, which essentially, if I'm playing a game, if I'm a Telegram game, I'm not there to view ads. If I view ads, it could be nice to have, right? But do you see business models changing to the extent where perhaps, things kind of go more along the subscription route, right? Where an NFT could be a subscription, or the in-game asset route where that's enough monetization not to show ads, or do you kind of see this hybrid model ultimately winning? How do you see it happening?
The winning Web3 business model is going to be built entirely around driving FTV. It's going to be built entirely around driving token price up, which is totally different than Web2. And I think this goes back to why Web3 projects don't actually know their user level LTVs. But ultimately, here's my really harebrained thesis on this. But what is marketing all about? It's purely about turning attention into value. And when you try to do that in Web2, you have to like go capture attention. It's extremely leaky bucket. That's why you serve millions of impressions and you capture this attention and you have to convert them 6 times into your product. And then once they're in your product, you have to control them down this like leaky funnel to actually get them to monetize. And finally you have revenue and you've turned attention into revenue. And you've gone from a funnel like this all the way down to this. It's very inefficient. Now in Web3, it's so efficient to turn attention into value that some value providers don't even have to enter your product. All they have to do is go and buy your token. And why is that important? Because ultimately, if token goes up, your project's treasury is denominated in your own token. So when token go up, your treasury goes up, your buying power goes up. It's the exact same as having more revenue. So ultimately, and we're seeing this already, but nobody's really codified this, that's what their business is. But that's why so many of these businesses, I mean, sure, they're early, but they're way more focused on token price and FTV than they are on revenue because it ultimately has the same effect. And so that's what the winning model is going to be, in my opinion. Super harebrained. Let me hear your reactions to that.
I mean, my reaction is that I think a lot of L1s and L2s are kind of in the same boat, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, a lot of foundations are sitting on a bag of tokens, which they need to deploy to drive value. And then through that value, again,
it makes their bag bigger.
It makes their bag bigger, right? Price goes up. You would hope that,
Right.
you know, you're investing in the right projects are bringing in the right people, and the right people are essentially growing your network
Right.
in a way that increases your token price. And then once your token price increases, it's kind of this virtuous cycle. My point is, though, there also needs to be kind of so first of all, that's very, very hard to measure. And or the cause and effect of that is really hard to measure. And again, it kind of gets back to the question of ROI. Like those are two very, very far dots to connect. And then the other question is, you need to make sure that that growth is sustainable, right? You can't just inflate hot air and see price go up and assume that everything is good. You really have to kind of, again, focus on the long-term, enduring, sustainable value that you're able to provide your users so that it's sticky, right? That's actually a great segue. Let's go on to the next question, so I just came back from ETH in Brussels, and you know, there were so many trends that were kind of just everywhere, right? Whether it's roll-ups, everyone's spinning up on L2 or 3 these days. So DePIN, right? Decentralized physical infrastructure, the intersection of AI and Web3 obviously had a stage, and meme coins. And I feel, you know, like to me, it's kind of this double-edged sword. There's a lot of great things happening. There's a lot of noise. Out of all of these things, does anything kind of get you excited? And this is more of a macro question, not advertising or marketing specific. Where do you think kind of the industry's going? Are you optimistic? And what out of those things that I mentioned or anything else do you find super exciting?
There's 2 things that are very exciting to me right now. The first is actually meme coins, and I'll go into why. And the second is it seems that there's a very intense focus on UX right now for the first time, which is incredible for onboarding.
It's maturity.
Let me start on.
It spells maturity for our ecosystem. Yeah, finally, to your point. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And it's also how ultimately crypto can pass the mom test, you know, and eventually use some of these apps, which is key. But meme coins, something incredibly magical has happened when I think about it purely from an attention perspective. And this goes back to my my theory here, but meme coins have captured value, have turned attention into value more efficiently than I think anything I've ever seen. And that's why some of these meme coins go from nothing into, you know, $100 million or even close to $1 billion FTVs like very, very, very quickly, because it took out all of the inefficient steps and just purely said there's 2 steps: capture attention, Buy token price. Attention turns into value. Now, don't get me wrong, like these, aren't businesses and I don't know where they're going to go, but I was actually watching meme coins that started to like unlock this theory in my head. And so there's something there that I think we're all going to start to learn and absorb for whatever this next wave of efficiently turning attention into value is. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that I thought I was an early adopter, and then I learned that in our space I'm somewhat of a laggard. So I only learned about pump.fun
Yeah.
last week.
Okay.
And when I learned, do you know about
I do.
pump.fun? Yeah. Okay. So it's basically kind of, I don't know, within 2 clicks you can create a meme coin,
Yeah.
and you go to this website, and please do, viewers, please go to this website so you can kind of get a glimpse what's actually happening every second, or half a second. There's basically a new meme coin being generated, and it kind of reminds me of what was happening in 2021 around NFTs, in the sense
Right.
that, okay, now it's so easy to generate your NFT collection or your new meme coin, and it gets us back to the kind of the foundational question of, well, what is it that unifies people around this? And in my mind, at the end of the day, it comes down to finding, well, I mean, price go up is one,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
The problem with price go up is that's not sustainable. When it's just price go up, it's a casino, right? And I
Right.
think everyone who invests in a meme coin needs to know you're going to Vegas, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. It probably won't work.
Right.
But there's an outside chance that you'll turn $10 into a million, over time, if you pull exactly the right strings. Now, beyond that, though, and I think, back to your point, there's the notion of community, there's the notion of values, there's the notion even of just a sticky idea.
Right.
Let's rewind to Dogecoin. I was early enough in crypto to learn about Dogecoin. And at the time, everyone was just looking at the tech, and Dogecoin had nothing, right? It was like, okay, this is funny. It's a cute concept to relate to, but it's not going to drive our industry forward. So I think a lot of the OGs kind of had this. They totally missed Dogecoin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they were looking at the wrong things. They were looking at the technological capabilities. They were looking at, well, what can you build on it? What can you actually do with it? What is the utility, right?
Right.
What they forgot is the power of the idea, right?
That's right.
Of a
Of the
sticky
meme.
idea, of the meme. The meme, yeah, the force is, how do you say it? The force is strong with the meme, with the
Yeah.
right meme, right?
That's right.
And I think that's kind of where we're at. So to your point, we're kind of back to this attention economy, or I mean, the attention economy is always there, but memes are really, really interesting because, if you can kind of unpeel them and try to understand what is it about it that resonates with a
Yeah. Why
large
did it
enough of
work?
people. Why
Yeah.
did it work? Why is it sticky? And why does it spread? Again, that's the whole notion of a meme. Like, again, double-edged sword. On one side, I'm delighted that it's onboarding, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of new people. On the other side, I don't want people to get hurt, and I want this
No.
industry to kind of grow sustainably, and I want the expectations. When people are kind of investing in this stuff, I want them to know what they're actually getting into. So, mixed bag.
It's interesting, especially because you mentioned casino, which meme coins truly are. Arguably, casino is one of the few casino or GambleFi are like one of the few true product market fits of crypto that we found already,
Sure, sure.
which is probably why meme coins work so well. And then the other piece too is, when we talk about like trying to figure out why a meme worked, it's extremely interesting to me, especially coming from UA, right? Because I think when you're doing UA, a lot of times you're doing so much optimization around your creative. And ultimately, the really cool thing about it is you may find a creative that crushes it. You never actually know why it crushed it. You can absolutely propose theories,
Right. You can
but
hypothesize.
you
Yeah.
surely can, and you can A/B test. You can use that as a new A/B test and test it against a different background color or whatever, and continue to get it better. But you never actually know why. All you know is that it did. You have the data showing
Right.
you binarily did it work or did it not. And I think it's thinking about these memes and why one takes off or doesn't is very similar to that.
Yeah. And I guess another thought, you tell me if you agree with this, is for a meme coin to do well over time, it needs to spin off into something that's a little more of substance, right? So it's kind of that, that cold start problem that
That's
Web3
right.
solves in many ways. Once you get that capital, don't dump it. right?
That's right.
Deploy it, make it work for you. Add games, add integrations, find the ways that it can be useful to your holders. I think if that has to be the mindset for long-term success. Would you agree?
Totally agree. And the most powerful meme coins are ones where the community ends up taking over. You go
Yes.
into the Discord, and the largest whale community holder members are even more active than the dev, and they end up capturing some large treasury and actually take over and direct the community on their own. And now these co-owners of the network actually become the stewards of the project, even more so than the dev ever actually was. That's when something really magical happens. And I think the largest meme coins around, that's what's happened with them.
And another interesting analogy could be a Berachain. So
Yeah.
started as an NFT project, right? Grew the community, got a lot of excitement, got the funds in, and now they're a protocol, right? Essentially.
Berachain's done
And
great.
yes, yeah.
It really
So
has. Are you playing around with any meme coins?
oh, I'm not. I'm too scared. I'm
I
too
get that.
scared.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like Ethereum's a meme coin, man. So I get that
Sometimes.
completely.
Sometimes, yeah. All right, Quinn. So this has been great. So many bases covered. I'm sure we could cover many, many more, but we'll have to save that for the next time. Why don't you tell us where we can find you and how we can keep in touch?
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been a blast, Shamir. Thank you for having me, man. Yeah, people can find me on Twitter and Telegram at Quinn2992, QUINN 2992. So that's the same on Twitter and Telegram. I've got a list on Twitter called Attention Tech. It's basically a list of all of like the biggest voices in Web3, building in Web3 attention tech. Would absolutely recommend anyone who's interested to kind of follow there. But yeah, on that note, at PTAL, we have some really interesting kind of growth channels, supply options here now. We're very interested in talking with advertisers. So any advertiser, any Web3 marketer who wants to start to do some experiments, even if small scale, to throw some ad budget behind something, we've got very cool growth channels. We've got Telegram, we've got KOLs, affiliates, UGC, blogs even. We've got some cool display options like pixels tips, and we've got some in-game options as well. We're even launching an experiment with pixels, pixels.xyz right now. So anyways, very interested in talking with advertisers. Anybody who wants to throw some ad budget behind something, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Fantastic. Good times ahead. Quinn, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being our guest here at the Addressable Insights Podcast. And until next time, I'll see you later.